We should probably do some sort of introduction. Like, hi, everybody. I'm Patricia.
I'm Lee.
And we're weird as fuck.
Yeah, I suppose you probably should, I guess so.
Yeah. Because someday we might be famous. Okay. So.
Mm-hmm.
65 million years ago, a massive meteor strike killed the dinosaurs. Or did it? Throughout history, reports from around the world, from Africa to North America, have spoken of massive, leathery creatures flying overhead. Is it possible that a breeding population of pterosaurs survived to modern times? Some imaginative researchers think so. Okay.
So,
Are we talking? Can you hear me?
yep.
So, what do you know about pterosaurs?
That they're dead.
They are supposed to be extinct for about 65 million years now. And you should know a little bit because we've already recorded all of this once, but somehow we fucked up and only recorded you
Yep.
occasionally grunting into the microphone while you listen to me.
That's what I'm here for.
Yeah. Grunts, baby. Patricia Willis and the Caveman, brought to you by... All right, so yes, pterosaurs are extinct.
They're big ass, huge dinosaur birds.
They're not actually dinosaurs.
I know they're not
and
dinosaurs,
they're not actually
but
birds.
I couldn't remember what the hell the name was.
Giant flying reptiles.
Yeah, reptiles.
Giant. Some of them are quite large. So, again, when the massive asteroid hit the Earth about 65 million years ago and created the conditions that led to the end of the dinosaurs, that supposedly took out the pterosaurs too. I mean, it makes sense. Giant fires, nuclear winter, it kills all the vegetation. Plant eaters can't survive. They die. There's nothing for the meat eaters to eat. They die. Not to mention air quality is poor and you can't breathe. Pterosaurs maybe would have had an easier time because they could prey on fish.
Yeah.
And all the fish didn't die. But pretty unlikely, right?
Especially when it got cold. So
Exactly. If you're talking about lizards,
don't.
lizards are not warm-blooded creatures, so it's entirely likely that they would have just frozen to death.
you would think.
You would think. But au contraire, there have been sightings all over the world of creatures that fit the description of pterosaurs all the way into the modern day.
Yeah, I saw some videos.
You saw some videos. I told you some
Some
stories.
look like they could be drones. Some look like it would take a lot of effort to make it look like that, though.
A couple were obvious animations.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
always some fake ones.
Yes, of course there
A couple
are.
of them look pretty real to me.
A couple of them were fairly convincing, and that's why I dug a little bit deeper. And I found some stories that might interest you. So, in Africa, now, don't believe the maps when you look at the maps that we have of the world as we know it. They've scaled down certain continents and scaled up certain other continents. Africa is massive. Africa is larger than all of North America, easily, by many times. And within Africa, there are creatures that we still don't know about. In fact, gorillas living in Africa were thought to be a complete hoax until one was actually captured at the end of the 19th century and brought to Europe. So it's possible that something in Africa exists that we haven't identified yet. And they have a creature there called the Kongomato. The name translates roughly to overturner of boats. And African tribesmen have been reporting for generations that these creatures nest near the rivers and sometimes swoop in and steal the catch from fishermen, thus the overturner of boats.
Never ate any people?
Well,
You'd think they'd just
yeah.
come by and grab one of them and be more meat.
Yes, but if you're a fish eater and you have fish eater teeth, then maybe humans are too tough.
Yeah, and
Also, we fight back.
if that's your normal stuff you eat, then yeah.
So this creature has been spotted in several areas, but most recently in the Sudan, people have reported seeing the creature perched on roofs of huts in some of the smaller outlying villages. These people have been close enough to be able to see that the creature was hairless, had a crest, and had pointy teeth like a carp. In one very memorable case in the 1980s or 90s, a young man was delivering a tray of food to some relatives in another hut when he saw a large creature sitting on top of the roof of the building he was about to enter. He froze, because there are things in Africa that will eat you.
No, lots of stuff will eat you.
Without even thinking twice. And he could see a creature that he estimated to be between 4 and 5 feet tall. It spread out its wings, hopped off the top of the building and into the air, and soared over his head. He lost his shit, dropped the tray, and ran for it. Like you do.
Pissed himself a little bit.
Well, he doesn't report that, but I'm sure. When he reported it, he said that it had a head crest, broad leathery wings, and was utterly devoid of feathers or fur. Some people claim that what he saw was a lion, but lions don't fly.
Yeah, it's a
and
lion.
He insisted that the creature flew over his head. Many years later, when he was an adult, he gained access to a computer and did some research. And he swears to this day that the creature that he saw was a pterosaur. Which...
It's pretty weird.
That's pretty weird. And this is a guy who's not known for strange flights of imagination. He's not trying to cash in and make money off of these claims, but he's insistent that what he saw was a flying lizard, not a lion, not a bat, because bats do grow pretty large in some of these subtropical areas.
Especially over there, they got some big-ass bats. But they're hairy.
Yeah, their entire center mass is covered with hair to keep them warm, to make up for those leathery little wings. And being a native of the area, you would have thought that he would recognize a species that you see as often as that.
Yeah, it would have big ears. I mean, totally different from what he described.
Exactly.
And if it literally flew over your fucking head, I mean, how the hell are you going to not see that in detail?
Exactly. And I don't believe that bats in the Sudan grow to 4 to 5 feet tall.
No.
I'd have to look that up. I don't think so.
They showed some of those great big bats, and there was like one really big one, and it had like a 6-7 foot wingspan.
Yeah. I mean,
but it was only about, I think it was like 3 feet.
I was going to say that would be about 2.5 to 3 feet tall with a 6 foot wingspan.
Freaking big.
Yeah, that's a big
big
bat.
old honking teeth on it, and it was nasty. Not something I'd want to run into.
Bats that large are generally fruit eaters, aren't they?
I think, I forget what the name of the damn thing was.
Flying fox?
I don't remember, but it was big.
I mean, you would think bats don't make good predators of large prey just because their wings are so fragile.
No, they just eat. I thought they said it ate birds and bugs.
That
and
I could see. Bugs, yeah.
Stuff like that. But
yeah, this kid insisted that it wasn't a bat. It wasn't a lion. And as an adult, he looked back. Now, we could chalk that up to your memory changes over time.
Yeah.
I remember things from my childhood that aren't right. I remember seeing a beaver on the ocean, walking out to the beach. And I did see the beaver, but I remember it being massive. My mother insists that it was just a regular sized beaver. It's just that I was very small. So my perspective was off. So we could chalk it up to something like that. So maybe he didn't see quite what he thinks he saw. But there are stories in New Guinea as well. So in New Guinea, they refer to it as the ropen. Residents of the islands have a very long tradition of creatures that fly high in the skies above the villages. The creatures, the locals claim, are nocturnal, bioluminescent, and massive, with wingspans ranging from 5 to up to 30 feet.
That's big.
Yeah. There are no bats that have wingspans of 30 feet.
Or glow in the dark.
No. And when we recorded this before, I was wondering why anything like that would be glowing in the dark. That's not really conducive to being hidden as a nocturnal creature. And Mew made a really good point. Do you remember what it was?
Yep, about trying to attract mates.
Exactly, like a glow bug.
Yeah.
So,
But it could also attract
Prey?
stuff at night. Yeah, that would be attracted to light.
yeah, I just wonder
But
what they'd be
something-
hunting.
That big, I mean, wouldn't be something out at night that they could eat in the sky.
Yeah.
Other than bats, and they aren't going to look at light.
No, but
so-
aren't fish attracted to light too? If you go
Yeah.
night fishing?
But it'd have to sit there for quite some time on the shore to attract them.
Well,
But
unless
I
they're
don't know.
circling the water.
Yeah. I still think it's a mating thing.
You always think
Maybe.
it's a mating thing.
Say, look at me, baby.
Oh, Lordy. Okay, moving on. These creatures are said to be scavengers who prefer to feed on decaying flesh and sometimes even harass funerary mourners and prey upon the deceased. So,
Yummy.
that lets go of my whole they're fishing idea. No, they're eating dead people. A funerary procession is carrying a wrapped, recently deceased relative. A 30-foot creature attacks you from above. You drop grandma and you run, right?
Yeah. Something that
She's
big
already dead. She doesn't care anymore. So you go for it.
could easily carry a human away.
Oh, yeah. You would think with a 30-foot wingspan, it would have to be, 12, 15 feet tall?
Yeah, it could easily take a cow. That
Except if they're
big.
scavengers.
Yeah.
And again, you have a creature that has delicate teeth and wings. It probably wouldn't want something that's going to fight back.
Seemed like something that big wouldn't have that small of teeth, but who knows?
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't actually seen
There
one
might
up
be
close.
different breeds too, so.
And now, like I said, the people of New Guinea have had these stories for generations, and people have dismissed them as being, these are primitive people, and they aren't familiar with modern things, and they're mistaking an invasive species for something else. And while I think that that's probably borderline racist, they've attempted to use those arguments to discount them. But in 1944, Dwayne Hodgkinson and a friend who is unnamed were enjoying a walk along the islands of Papua New Guinea. And as they proceeded toward a clearing, they were startled by the sounds of something rushing through the tall grass. They froze, knowing that wild boars do inhabit the area and they can be really dangerous.
They're mean little suckers.
They're
They'll
mean. They
gore
have those
ya.
tusks. They'll tear you open just to get past you. They're
Yep.
nasty. So they froze, waiting to see if it was a predator or one of these wild pigs. But when it broke through the grass, they could see it was a pig. And it was going in the other direction. So they relaxed, knowing that they weren't going to be targets. But they were wondering what was chasing the pig. Because obviously, if he's afraid, there's something scarier in the grass. Well, they didn't have long to wait. Because they heard this whooshing noise. And this massive creature stood upright, spread its great leathery wings, and these are direct quotes from him, and pressed down, lifting off the ground with some effort. Now, Dwayne Hodgkinson is a pilot, so he's familiar with the things that fly, and he's got to have a pretty good sense of size. Because you
Yeah.
have to be able, especially when you're landing a small plane in places like New Guinea, you need to be able to judge at a glance whether or not you're going to fit where you're going. Or if you're passing too close to something, especially at low altitude flying. So I feel pretty confident when he says that he judged this creature to have a wingspan of about 25 feet. That's huge.
Yeah, that's a big bird.
That's like 3 times the size of a California condor. Those are huge birds. He said it was nearly the size of a small passenger plane. He claimed that the animal was dark gray, possessed a long serpentine neck, so snake-like neck, a long tail with a wide flange on the end. So like a diamond shape, sort of bulb on the end. As it flew overhead, he could see that it had a mouth full of pointed, sharp teeth and long, sharp claws. It was, he said, without a doubt, a living dinosaur, something history books had taught him had been extinct for millions of years. And while his claim is remarkable, it's not exactly unique. On maps dating back as far as 1595, mariners have warned of vicious flying creatures that bear a striking resemblance to pterosaurs when drawn out on the maps. Of course, we can discount that because they also drew mermaids. And, half women, half fish don't exist. But some of the things that they drew on those maps we thought were fables, and they've proven to exist, like giant squid, giant fish. Have you seen a full-sized adult sunfish?
Yeah, they get pretty big.
They get very, very large, and those were mistaken for sea serpents, but they exist. There are also reports of smaller ropen that haunt the skies above Papua New Guinea and Indonesia. These creatures are reported to have wingspans of just 3 to 4 feet, so something more like the young man in Africa saw. They're fish eaters, and similar to those reported also in Cambodia and Vietnam, although sightings of the smaller cryptids are far rarer than the larger ones. And one can assume it's because if they are nocturnal and they're not bioluminescent, they're keeping a pretty low profile.
Yeah, it could also be babies, too.
They could be babies, but they're described as having much broader faces, which much blunter snouts.
Gray. So,
and having a different diet. So rather than being tiny scavengers, they're tiny fish eaters. And again, it could be because they change as they grow older. We have several species that humans are familiar with that look very different. Tadpoles don't look like frogs.
Yeah.
Fry don't exactly look like fish, the fish that they're going to grow into. So it's possible that they could grow into the larger cryptids. But the stories coming out of New Guinea report that these are different ropen. But it doesn't stop in Africa and Asia. Cryptids have been reported in the United States and Canada as well.
Of course.
Of course. We have everything here. Except for competent leadership, but that's another story for another time. Reports of large flying reptoids have been made in the United States, Mexico, and even as far north as Canada. The indigenous people of North America have a long history of creatures that they call the thunderbird. This creature was supposed to be protective of certain tribes and capable of creating thunder with its wings. So if you can imagine something with a 30-foot wingspan was flying over your head, it would probably be pretty loud, especially if it didn't have feathers to deaden the sound.
Yeah. I think it'd sound like thunder, but who knows?
If you were scared shitless, it would.
Yeah.
I would think so, yeah. Among the Algonquin tribes, these creatures were responsible for protecting humankind from beings from the underworld by throwing lightning at them. Among the Menominee, it was believed that the thunderbird prevented the great horned snake from overturning the earth and devouring humankind. Among the Ojibwe, they were thought to fight the underwater spirits. During the spring, they migrated south when the danger of the underwater spirits attacking was past. So they were believed to be protectors. And if you have something that's that large and that fearsome, and it's not preying on you, but it's preying on things that could potentially harm you, I can see how that sort of legend could come to pass.
Yeah, that's for sure.
So most recently, several sightings have occurred in Charlotte, North Carolina, including at least one accompanied by a compelling video. And I showed you that video.
Yeah, that was one of the ones that looked pretty real.
Yeah, that one was
That
interesting.
looked pretty real to me.
I mean, drone technology has gotten to the point where you can make drones. I've seen somebody make a lawnmower fly.
Yeah.
So you can make interestingly shaped drones, but
if it's that big, though, that would be pretty tough to pull off.
that would be pretty tough to do. And the fact that in the video, the wings were moving.
And they were moving right. I mean,
Yeah.
they weren't looking weird. One of them looked like the the wings just weren't moving right.
Well, yeah, and its head tipped down and it kind of tipped up and then they righted itself.
Yeah,
Flying
that
creatures
one's
don't do that.
might have been a drone, but that other one, that looked like a real
Yeah,
bird.
that was interesting.
The wings look good.
So Cynthia Lee, a student studying to become a veterinary technician, was on her way to work in January 2020, so just a few months ago, when she looked up and saw a leathery creature with a long tail and a bulb at the end flying overhead. A few months later, she was riding to work with a friend and saw it again. The friend was paying attention to the road while she was freaking out and looking at the sky, so her friend didn't get to see it, but so she reported seeing it twice, and this was over the skies of Charlotte, North Carolina, and there have been a few dozen reports over Charlotte. If you go to charlottestories.com, they report that a man and his cousin saw something bringing to mind the word dragon, and that it looked like it had been taken from a Jurassic Park movie. In Asheville, North Carolina, a lady saw a huge black-winged creature fly very low over her car. She reports that it had no feathers, but sharp edges to its features. And in Jacksonville, an eyewitness saw something huge fly overhead. It looked like a pale, greenish-white and smooth-skinned creature. It didn't appear to have any feathers, and it had a tail with a diamond shape on the end. So all of these are coming out of the North Carolina area, and I don't know if it's because of... I mean, it's pretty warm down there. There are still a lot of areas that are unincorporated, and the fishing is really, really good in the Gulf. So maybe these creatures have just made a home for themselves. But you would think in such a heavily populated area that there would be more than just a few dozen sightings, that we'd have people by the droves calling in.
Yeah, you'd think.
If it were living in North Carolina, I would expect to see something like the reports that came out of Brownsville, Texas in 1976. So there were several school teachers and 2 police officers who reported seeing something massive flying overhead. One officer reported that it's like a bird, but not a bird. Thank you, Officer Obvious. That's very helpful. He was convinced that the animal was not from this world. All the witnesses claimed that the creature was featherless, crested, and had a wingspan of approximately 12 feet across, and was unlike anything they'd ever seen. So one of the teachers was so surprised by what she saw, she actually went back to the school and dove into their research library. And remember, this is 1976, so we didn't have Google. She had to actually go into the encyclopedia and have a pretty good idea of what she was looking for before she found it. But she is adamant that what she saw fit the description of the pterosaur from the encyclopedia at the school.
Yeah, it seems like most people have seen them or same description, each one. So.
Yeah, I mean, they vary greatly in size, and I don't know if that's a regional thing. I mean, when you think about the size of birds, we have different kinds of birds that range in different sizes all across the country, with, larger birds being to the south. Also, different colorations depending upon the region that they're in. So if something's in North Carolina, you would expect kind of grayish green. Whereas if it's in Brownsville, Texas, and the desert, you'd expect it to be browner, maybe.
Yeah.
So it would fit in with the terrain. That would be an adaptation over time. So sightings of the creature went on for several weeks, and the hunt for it became so prevalent and so alarming that the Department of Fish and Game declared that all birds in the area were protected and hunting of them was off limits. They were concerned that somebody would get so excited that they would try to shoot this thing, and they would instead kill an endangered heron. So they just decided, whatever it is, we're protecting it. Stop. I'm sure that worked.
Yeah, like you can protect something that is not supposed to exist.
It doesn't exist, but if it does exist, please don't kill it. Please.
Somebody is going to want to shoot it and say, hey, here it is.
Well, this is Texas. Everybody has a gun,
Yep.
and they're all looking for the thing.
Let's go pterosaur hunting.
That was very unkind, darling. So the warm regions of the southern Gulf states aren't the only places where they've seen this thing. They've seen it in Washington and Oregon as well.
Yeah.
Specifically in the Yakima Valley and the Columbia River Gorge. So along the Columbia River Gorge, along I-84, this anonymous witness, and I'm going to read this verbatim because it's kind of cool, was out, and he reported seeing this. He says, "My wife and I were coming back from Skamania Lodge on the Washington side of the Columbia River Gorge. At the time, we lived in the Portland, Oregon area, and we were driving back west on I-84 to get home. Coming left to right across the highway, about 100 yards, give or take, in front of us, came the most odd-looking thing I've ever seen in my life. My wife and I both immediately said, 'What was that?' Probably only about 30 feet or so off the ground. We only had about 2 seconds of visual on it because it came swooping over the trees on the left side of the highway. It had a longer neck, a crested head, big curved wings that connected to the back of the body, and a long tail. Out of all those things, the tail is what stood out to me. The tail was longer than the animal's whole body from tip to head to base of tail." And so one thing that really strikes me is that every single one of these accounts claim that it's featherless. So we're not looking at a bird who has some sort of skin disease, because featherless birds can't fly. They don't have the necessary wing structure that would allow them to. They rely on their feathers for lift. I don't know if you've ever seen a naked bird.
Oh, yeah.
It's very sad.
That's weird looking.
But they're incapable of flight. So this couldn't have been a bird. It's possible that it was a bat, but bats don't have tails.
Nope.
So these compelling claims earned the attention of Peter Beach, a biologist, and Milt Marcy, a businessman. Both of these men are creation scientists, and they've set out to prove that the creatures not only exist, but they're living alongside modern humans. Creation scientists believe that the Earth is only 6,000 years old, and that humans, of course, the Bible tells us that humans were created at the beginning of all things with the rest of the creatures, and that we've lived with all of these creatures since time immemorial. And these guys don't believe, obviously they can't believe, that pterosaurs are 65 million years extinct. So it has to be a recent phenomena. And so they, like I said, they set out to prove that they existed, and their quest has taken them to Papua New Guinea, Africa, and the U.S. They've studied sightings in Cuba and Mexico as well, and believe that without a doubt, it's possible that a breeding population of these massive animals do still exist and can be seen by keen observers in far-flung reaches of the world. Mainstream scientists disagree, for obvious reasons. They believe that in the thousands of years that naturalists have spent exploring the world and cataloging its inhabitants, if something that large was flying overhead, we'd have noticed by now.
You would think so.
It's kind of hard to fault that logic. People who are adamantly in favor of pterosaur theory point out that the coelacanth was supposed to have been extinct for 35 million years, and we found several, off the coast of Africa in the 1930s, and you can still see them today. Also, the giant squid exists, and we've finally been able to prove that. The difference is, though, that typically we're pretty capable of looking into the sky and seeing what's above us. It's much more difficult to explore the depths of the ocean.
Yeah, it's amazing how much of the ocean we have never seen.
Yeah, I think, what is it? We know like 7%.
It's nothing.
Something like that. It's almost nothing. While it's true that no firm evidence has yet presented itself, there are videos, but those are suspects. And like we said, the creatures are blurry, or they don't move right, or they're obvious fakes. I showed you that one where if you do a freeze frame on it, it's obviously a cartoon. That was just embarrassing. There actually have been notable scientists who have claimed to see things, particularly in Papua New Guinea. In 1935, biologist Evelyn Cheeseman, I love her name, wrote in her book, The Two Roads of Papa, that she had seen a bioluminescent creature flying through the night sky. In her book, she writes, "It was a most intriguing mystery, because by no possibility could there be human beings out there using flash lamps at intervals. In any case, they were too far to be caused by an ordinary electric torch." I'm assuming that she means too far from the ground.
Yeah.
There are dozens of stories that we could relate to here. But the reality is that while Miss Cheeseman doesn't specifically say there was a pterosaur, she does report having seen something that was bioluminescent flying in the skies above Papua New Guinea. And this wasn't a woman who was, again, known to flights of fancy. She was grounded in science. She was interested in cataloging the creatures that actually existed, that she could prove existed. And this is just sort of an incidental notation that she makes that, oh yeah, I saw something that was flying. She's not making this report because she's trying to gain notoriety for herself, or she's trying to make a claim for something that is extraordinary. It's just a side note saying, oh, and we saw this, which in my mind gives it even more credence because it's not something that she's trying to exploit. It's just something that she's noting for the next researchers that come that, oh yeah, you might want to look up.
As many times as I've drove down the gorge, I think I would have saw one by now.
Well, yeah, we live. I mean, you live there for most of your life. We know people who have lived there for their whole lives.
I had to commute for years. I mean, every day going up and down it, and plus driving a truck up and down it, and it's like, never saw anything.
But if these creatures are naturally nocturnal, would you?
Yeah.
Because typically, I mean, there are stretches in the gorge that are pretty dark. There's no ambient light. We don't have street lights up and down the highway like they do in some countries. And if you get out like towards the Yakima Valley, some of those roads are pitch black at night.
Yeah.
So if you're in a car when you're dealing with road noise and the sound of the engine, you wouldn't necessarily hear something flying above you.
No, I wouldn't hear anything. Be able to see it is be about it.
So I don't necessarily believe that there's a breeding population of pterosaurs fluttering about, preying on funeral arrangements or, diving at fishermen. But there are an awful lot of accounts of people who still to this day, obviously March of this year, it's only 4 months ago, claim to have seen something large and leathery flying through the sky. And I think it's interesting.
Yeah, that's an awful lot of accounts for a long period of time, but then you look at Bigfoot and everything else, and
yeah, we have
lots
Bigfoot,
of accounts, and lots of people see it, and yet nobody's ever captured one.
But nobody can prove anything. And you think everybody's got a damn phone. Take pictures.
Mm-hmm.
What's wrong with you people?
Then they just say they're fake.
Well, not only that, but I mean, seriously, our phones are amazing. You can film movies with the new iPhones. Can we just get one that's in focus and not grainy? That's all I'm asking.
That would be nice.
I don't ask for much. I want evidence. So if you've seen a pterosaur or something like a pterosaur, or you have any evidence, any photos, any videos, or know where we can see something better than what we found, tell us. We want to know.
Yeah, we're interested.
We want to know. We want to share.
Just come on the show. We're weird as fuck.
We want to talk to you. So you can see all of our sources on our website at www.weirdasfck.com. Scroll to our blog, go to the bottom. You'll have this whole story and every source that we listed, so you can check out the details for yourself. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. Want to stay connected between shows? Find us on Instagram at WeirdAsFCKPodcast, on Facebook at WeirdAsFCKPodcast, on Twitter at WeirdAsFuckPod1, they're a little bit more open-minded, or on the web at www.weirdasfck.com. There you can check out our blog, get more information on each episode, pick up some merch, send us ideas for future shows, or share your own weird experiences. You might even make it on a future episode. We would love to hear from you. Until then, tune in and keep it weird. Are you entertained? Step on over to Apple Podcasts and leave a review. Your 5-star rating helps to boost us up in the listings so other podcast listeners can find the show.